So today I'm making a video that I've wanted to make for a little while. This is about scammers on eBay. I'm talking about people selling watches, them knowing that they are fake, not really relaying that information, or selling fake watches at heavily discounted prices versus the actual original watches. I've been collecting watches for a very long time. I remember eBay being a place that you can go to and get a great watch at a great price. However, there's always been counterfeiters and scammers on eBay, so you had to be really careful. You had to know about the watch that you were going to purchase. And even then, if you purchased a watch based off of the pictures and information that was provided, it didn't mean you were getting that watch. Now these days, scammers and counterfeiters have really figured out a lot of different ways to get around all of the precautions that eBay have put into place recently. So that authentication process that they initiated not that long ago. However, it seems as though eBay themselves have built in some workarounds on their own authentication process. If you list a watch as modded or there being modifications of the watch, you get around that process. Or if you strategically price a watch in a certain way, you can get around that process as well. So, without further ado, we're going to take a look at some examples of watches that I have found on eBay and that I have personally reported on eBay a number of times. And I actually did a little short video that I put up on Instagram about a watch, a Vacheron that I found that was counterfeit, 100% counterfeit. There was actually misspellings on the dial. I reported that watch and eBay came back to me and told me there was nothing wrong with that watch and the listing went on. And I'll throw up a little video of that watch. So we're gonna start with one of the best fakes that I have ever seen on eBay, and really one of the best fakes I've ever seen. This is a 50 Fathoms. No, not the Swatch 50 Fathoms. This is a real or real looking 50 Fathoms. It's an aqualung with a no radiations dial. It has a reprinted dial. They actually tell you this is a reprinted dial and a remanufactured case, or a case that has been made to look like a vintage case. So what you're getting here is a dial that is not Blancpain and a case that is, again, not a 50 Fathoms case. However, they're saying that the movement is a 50 Fathoms. It's an A-Shills movement with a Blancpain rotor on it. Now, whether or not this is actually a true Blancpain rotor or if this is actually an A-Shills, I don't know. It could be a Chinese clone. However, they've replicated the case back. They've replicated the bezel. There are definite tells that this watch is a fake if you are trained and you know about vintage 50 Fathoms. However, to the common person, this would definitely get by. And the fact that they're charging a few $1,000s for it is also a big tell that this is not a real 50 Fathoms. And actually what they were doing prior to me reporting one of these watches is that they were just selling these directly on eBay. Now what they're doing is they're selling the bezel, and in the description section, they're just saying, contact me if you want the entire watch. If you don't just want the bezel, which they're selling for $300, the dial, which they're selling for $400 or $500. Again, none of this watch is original. It's basically just a fake, and they're calling it a modded watch. Now, I don't know if that movement is real, but they are admitting that the dial and the case are reproduction. The next watch we're going to talk about is a Rolex. It's a 5510 Big Crown. This is a good looking watch from the 1950s, and these retail about $50,000 to $60,000, very similar to that 50 Fathoms. However, this is a sale for a bezel. Now, they're saying that this bezel is a reproduction. However, if you want the full watch with the case, the crystal, the dial, the movement, the whole 9 yards, they can provide that as well. So they're selling this bezel for $899. If you contact them, they'll sell you the entire watch, and essentially it's a fake watch. Now, I'm not sure what they use for a movement in this watch. They actually don't mention it in the auction. Obviously, that's something, I guess, if you go down that road, they would tell you, but this is a fake watch this is a fake bezel. And the fact is that you really can't actually report this. I've tried, and eBay has come back to me and said, there's really nothing wrong with this auction. It's pretty incredible. Now the next watch. This is actually a very common occurrence on eBay and has been for a very long time. Now these were very common maybe 5 to 10 years ago on eBay. There were a lot of pocket watches that were being disassembled. The movements were recased or repurposed into a modern case with a modern dial or the existing dial, and that was basically a Frankenstein watch or a marriage watch is what they call it. However, counterfeiters and scammers have taken it to the next level. They're calling these watches marriage watches. However, what they are is essentially a Chinese movement in a fake Chinese case with a horrible Chinese dial. This is a Vacheron, or like they're calling it a Vacheron. However, none of this watch is Vacheron. None of this watch is actually made by Vacheron or was ever made by Vacheron. There is no pocket watch that this came from. It's just a complete reproduction. So this is basically a fake watch. These are selling for over $2,000. In fact, this watch that we're looking at right now costs $2,550. You can make an offer on it, and these are currently for sale. Again, since this is a modded watch, this is not considered a fake, so eBay allows it. None of the watches that we have looked at today are considered fake on eBay, and that's how they're getting around the process of authentication on eBay. Now I'm saving the best for last because the next watches that we're going to look at are pretty funny. These are Grand Seiko Snowflake replicas. So I use the word replica, but these are Seiko modded Grand Seiko watches. That's what they're basically calling them in the auctions. They're using the word mod. These are modded watches. Both of the watches that we're looking at right now are powered by an NH35. However, on the dial, it says high beat. And they're considering these snowflake dials, but these are not really snowflake dials. These are really cheap dials in really cheap cases that are meant to either look like, in one case, a Rolex, because this has a fluted bezel, and in another case, it looks like what a Grand Seiko would be cased in. Obviously, I'm sure that the quality isn't on the same level, but it does say high beat on the dial. It says Grand Seiko on the dial, even though these are Seiko modded watches. None of this comes from Seiko except for that NH35. And I really think it's kind of Seiko's fault because they allow NH35s to be sold throughout the world and they end up making their way into fake watches like this. Again, this is a modded Seiko watch according to eBay. So these are allowed to be sold. You'll see Santos, Cartier Santos replications in a Seiko dial form. It's basically a Santos case and bracelet. They slap on Seiko on the dial, and none of it comes from Cartier, none of it comes from Seiko. It's just basically a fake watch again, except of course it does have that NH35 in it, which is the only thing that actually comes from Seiko. Very, very funny. And here's another one just to boot. This is a diver's watch that has a snowflake dial. However, it's not a snowflake dial. Seiko never made a watch like this. I'm pretty sure they have never made a watch like this. And essentially, again, all of the parts on this watch are not Seiko. And it has a snowflake dial, but a Seiko name, not Grand Seiko. And then the case back is sort of Grand Seiko. So a very confused watch. And I have to say, actually a pretty good looking watch, but at the same time, again, a fake watch essentially. But I'd like to reiterate, all of these watches are allowed to be on eBay because of eBay's rules. And these are not considered fake watches by eBay. And maybe a lot of people out there would not consider these fake watches because possibly one component of the watch is made by a company in the title name. So Seiko, there might be a Seiko part in one of these Seiko watches, and there might be a 50 Fathoms part in the 50 Fathoms watch. That movement could possibly be a 50 Fathoms movement. I doubt it, but it could be. So I think that's why they allow it. Doesn't make a lot of sense. The Vacheron is completely, I don't know why they allow that. However, again, they call it a marriage watch. It's very hard to prove whether or not that is an actual Vacheron movement. I would say it's not just from looking at it, but eBay doesn't have the facilities to actually authenticate down to that sort of level. So obviously it's just going to slip through the cracks. Tell me what you guys think down in the comments below. What do you think of all the watches that we looked at today? Do you think some of them are funny? I know some of them are funny. However, what do you think about the authentication process in eBay? Is it working? I know it is working for certain watches, and obviously for some, they're just slipping through the cracks, and scammers are taking advantage, and maybe in some cases not taking advantage. I think a lot of people who are buying these watches know well what they are buying, however, decide to go this route for one reason or another. Tell me what you think down in the comments below. I want to hear from you guys. Please also don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell icon. It's super helpful for the channel, and I very much appreciate it. Anyway, guys, thank you for logging on. I'll catch you guys in the next video.